Morning algebra classes. We're going to take a look at 9.6D samples, preparing us for our quiz 9.6D today. So we're going to take a look at some quadratic equations. We're going to follow the directions for how we're to solve each of these. So we've been working a few days on mastering being given a particular solution method and to implement that to solve our quadratic equation. So the first problem is to solve 5x squared minus 14x minus 3 equals 0 by factoring. And so the factoring that's going to pop into our head is greatest common factoring. That's our first step always to think about whether or not that works. And in this case, 5, negative 14, and 3 can only be divided by 1, and so our greatest common factoring for those numbers, 5, 14, and 3, is not helpful, and there is no variable in all three of the terms. So greatest common factoring won't work here. So we're going to think quadratic factoring. So I set up my x, and I think what multiplies to make 5x squared? 5x times x is the only combination that multiplies to make 5x squared. And for 3, it's a prime number, so the only way to break that down is into 1 times 3. But we do need to get the 1 and the 3 in the right location so that our middle term is, in fact, negative 14. So look at our diagonals. We have 5x times negative 3, which is negative 15, plus 1x. So negative 15x on this downward diagonal plus 1x on the upward diagonal gives us what we need. It gives us negative 14x, and 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So we're going to write that across in our binomials. So 5x plus 1 is one of our binomials times the other binomial, x minus 3. And I'm just going to check to make sure now that I have it written in factored form. So this trinomial in factored form, let's make sure it's right. 5x times x is 5x squared. My outside, negative 15x, plus my inside, 1x. Negative 15x plus 1x gives me the negative 14x I need. And then my last, 1 times negative 3 gives me negative 3. So I know I have factored it correctly, and I'm still equal to 0. So I'm just simply rewriting this equation. It's important that we continue to go through our steps, showing all of the steps of our solution and not taking shortcuts. All right, now it's time to set each factor equal to 0 and solve both of those linear equations. And so we're going to subtract 1 and divide by 5 to arrive at x is negative 1/5. And over here, we're simply going to add 3, and that gives us the other solution, x is 3. Second problem, solve by taking the square root. So on this one, this is a problem that will be solved easily by taking the square root because we're noticing we just see x squared but no x's. So taking the square root is a really good choice here. First, we subtract 5 on both sides. We get 7x squared equals 42. Then divide both sides by 7, giving us x squared is 6. Then we take the square root of both sides. We'll, of course, get 2 roots when we take the square root of 6, a positive and a negative root. We'll use our calculator. On our calculator, we're going to see a bunch of numbers on our display. So I've written down part of what you see, noticing that I do have both a positive and a negative root. Our calculator isn't going to show that, but we're going to know there's a positive and a negative root. And then I'm going to round off to the nearest hundredth because that is our protocol. Whenever we're solving a quadratic equation that doesn't come out just an integer or just a mixed number or decimal that ends, we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So this 4, the second 4 past that decimal point, will be rounded up to 5 because of the 9. Remember, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 will round you up, and 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 will round you down. So here's our two values that solve this quadratic equation. X is positive or negative 2.45. All right, so our last sample for today is going to be to solve using the quadratic formula. And I've written down that picture of what that is. Hopefully it's starting to stick in your brain. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And remember, that fraction bar needs to go all the way across. It needs to be a really long fraction bar because it's all one fraction when we plug in those numbers. So since this is already in standard form, we'll pull off our a, our b, and our c. The coefficient on the x squared term is our a, so negative 3. The coefficient on our x term is positive 12. And the constant is negative 4. We need to be equal to 0 to be able to pull off our a, b, and c. So our quadratic equation must be in standard form to identify a, b, and c. All right, now we plug it in, and I do expect to see this written on your paper this way, plugged in with just the numbers for a, b, and c before you start simplifying. So x is equal to the opposite of b. Well, b is 12. The opposite of that would be negative 12, plus or minus the square root of our b is 12, so 12 squared. I don't need parentheses around that 12 because it's positive. If that were a negative number, I would need parentheses around it to show what I'm actually squaring. All right, and then from the formula minus, from the formula 4, and then the a number is negative 3. Plug that in, and our c is negative 4. All over long fraction bar, 2 times our a number, which is negative 3. Now we said about simplifying this, and if we need a calculator, we'll use it at the end. So we're going to leave the negative 12, and then the 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. We'll leave that alone for a little bit, showing our plus minus. Make sure that each time you rewrite, you're showing everything. Don't take shortcuts. That leads to inaccuracies and confusion. All right, in the radical, 12 squared is 144. And then I am subtracting a negative here. I see 1, 2, 3 negative signs. So the 2 negatives cancel out and make a positive, so I'm still subtracting. So minus 48. And the negative 6 is still in the denominator. 144 minus 48 is 96. So in my radical, I have 96. Now I can pull this apart into 2 separate calculations that I need to carry out to find my 2 solutions. So negative 12 plus root 96 over negative 6, and negative 12 minus root 96 over 6. At this point, I can go ahead and use my calculator to approximate what root 96 is. So I'm rounding off to 2 decimal places here, losing a little bit of accuracy, but we're going to continue to use that protocol for this class. So this rounds off, the square root of 96 rounds off to 9.80. So in the hundredths place is a 0 when you round off. All right, so now I'm going to use my calculator to work out negative 12 plus 9.80 divided by negative 6, and that's going to give me 0.37. On my calculator, I'm going to see 0.3666 going on forever. And so that 6 to the right of my hundredths place is going to round my 6 in the hundredths place up to 7. And over here, negative 12 minus 9.80 divided by negative 6 is 3.63, rounded off to the nearest hundredth. And again, on my calculator, I'm going to see 3.6 and a bunch of 3's. And when I go to that second place, past the decimal point, the 3 to the right of that will round it down and keep that 3 the same. So I'll report x is equal to 0.37 and 3.63 as my final answers or solutions to this problem. Okay, that's it for our samples today, and it's time to move on then into making sure this is in your notes on your lesson and attempting the quiz. All right, we'll see you next time.